Enjoy.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna steal the stool.
I'll sit.
Don't know I'm here. That's all right. Go. I did a hearing with the state association of ethics, kind of thing. We're starting to do it by Zoom. Normally you're in 3 different spots, we got, Michelle, our attorney, and Juan, I'm in another spot, and whoever our agent is. But doing it in here with this camera, where we could all be together, but not have driven the minute out for the hearing, it was the coolest. And watching the camera just go back and forth following whoever's talking, really was just a cool way to do it. So there's been a lot of requests to talk about auctions and REO and what's going on in the world, where we headed and all that. When I come into a team meeting, I try to wet whistles a little bit and say, hey, this stuff is coming back again, so be ready, for it, instead of running from it, run towards it, kind of thing. So I just wanted to kind of strongly, wet whistles, get you to know what you're looking for, so that, really, I get phone calls all the time from agents that say, I don't understand, and they want to just refer their clients to me and have me take them. And I will take everybody's clients, that's an okay thing, but it seems dumb. Why don't you just sell them a house?
Right.
Why are we scared of something just because you've never done it? Why don't we just do it and, go slow and figure it out? So, the one thing that we've had a lot of chitter chatter about lately is auctions. And what's a real estate auction and what's going on when I hear those words. We all know in our head what an auction is, because you sit there with a number and you hold your number up and you're bidding, on a property. And I haven't done a ton of real estate sales that way before, where we actually did auctions on the steps of a house. If you're buying a foreclosure, sometimes people say you go to the foreclosure auction, and those are in some counties on the steps of the county courthouse. There's sort of that way, Texas, they do. They stand on the courthouse steps and bid on the foreclosure.
Sorry.
No problem. Look, the crowd is going. Did everybody see there's more people coming in?
Road construction has started.
Where's Minnesota doing that?
Minnesota does it actually in the courtroom. And normally on an actual, and that's when the sheriff's sale's done and they're doing the foreclosure. The only bidder in Minnesota normally is the mortgage company. You can go in and bid there. That's a whole different, that's not what I do. But that means you're actually bidding out the bank and taking over the bank's rights to the property. And then you have to go through the redemption period. If you get paid off, you get money back, you don't make any money, on the deal. The auctions that I'm talking about are real estate sales, you can pull up the MLS and search the word auction and there is auctions in there every day. I've got one I thought was actually gonna sell this morning, so it'd be really fun to be able to say, look, I sold one at an auction this morning, but they didn't take the high bid. But I've got one right now in Troy Golf Course in Wisconsin. And when you're looking at an auction property in the MLS, if you see it in the MLS, it just says auction. So if you pulled up 336 Lindsay, just make sure it's right in. So if you pulled it up, yeah, 336 Lindsay. The MLS would just say the word auction. And that doesn't really help you because there's a list price someplace here. So if you click on history, you'll actually then find what my list price is. That one we start out at 750 and I think we're at 711 or 719 or something like that now. It's important to know what the bank is thinking, because when you go into the auction site, that one is zoned. So if you do XOME auctions.com, you pull up zone auction properties and everywhere in the country. But you pull up that Lindsay property and it's going to show you minimum bid amount. The minimum bid, just like any other auction, is just trying to give a conversation. That's not what they're gonna take. Seldom do they even show you what the reserve is, but this one as an example. So did you just look up this price, I told 11 or 17? Okay, so that one had a bid of 618 that they didn't take. So again, I don't know what the reserve is, but it's not 618.
I can tell you what the reserve is.
They never tell me anything. You know, we just market rates. I thought they might look at it a little bit. My guess is it was close, and if they had moved the next increment, that one requires $25,000 increments of bids. Maybe that is the next bid, might have gotten them to talk. I've always assumed like 675, range. I sold it once for 686 and I fired back out. So you know that kind of a range with it. So when you're doing an auction, again, you need to know that price because you want to know when you see the minimum bid and you know list price. Now you got some flavor where you're at. You want to make sure that you're the one doing the bids for your client, not your client. Well, otherwise you don't get paid. Now Zome's a little nicer than others. Zome is the auction arm of Mr. Cooper, or Mr. Cooper Bank, which was nationwide and one time, various other names along the way. But they decided because there were so many complaints during the foreclosure craze and people that said my offer didn't get presented. So they put an auction arm together because then you present your own offers. So you can't say anybody didn't get it through. We didn't have that problem in Minnesota, but there were other parts of the country where truly only the listing agent's offers were ever getting presented, or who you represent. But if you go into that site, Mr. Zone site, actually, if you don't put an agent in, they put me in and pay me. So they want an agent to be in there, but I would rather pay you than me, or I'm getting paid as a listing agent. I don't need, all of it opposed to it. None of them pay well. So the other thing, you get a lot of agents that don't want to. I get a lot of agents that don't want to do them because they don't pay well. You see a lot of them that are 1%, 1.5%, in a commission. Now, again, though, if it's up to 600,000, it's not like it's a little check, it's still a check. But I'll get agents that'll call and say, I don't want to work, it's not enough for my time. Hey, I'll take your client, they'll ask for a referral, yeah, never pay a referral. You don't want to represent your client, you want me to work for them, then I'll take your client. I think that's when we work on our scripts. When you say to your client, look, we were out there looking at houses along the way, we came up to this auction property. And just so you understand, we have to tell them what we're getting paid anyhow. But we can either just slide the form or we can say it a little longer, right? Make sure that they're clear. I'm only getting paid 1% on that. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what I get paid is actually not important at all. Me representing you, caring for you, loving you, and becoming your realtor for life and your family's realtor for life is why I do this. So even though we have an agency contract that says 2.7 or whatever you put on it, I'm not going to try to collect the difference and having you understand simply that this is the right property for you and I'm going to represent you on it. Now you get more business off of that, or you can just simply say, I don't like it, they're not paying as much than I can have. Which is what I get from a lot of agents, like, how dare they insult me with it? Really say that from your buyer? Sometimes shame on me.
It's not the MLS, you can go see it possibly, or.
Yes. So on that one, I'll give you one more auction thing that you can, but that one is the MLS listing, you can go see it. Most auction companies will run an auction timeframe. So using this property as an example, it goes live in, since they didn't take this offer, it goes live in the auction again on Saturday until I think it's like 10 o'clock on Tuesday. So it's giving everybody, the whole point of auctions is everybody that said I didn't get a chance, gets a chance. Now, the thing to understand about auctions, though, when you're working with your clients, there's an auctioneer's premium. Doesn't go to us, let's do the auction company. If you've ever been to a regular auction, there's always an auctioneer's premium, it's 5%, 10%, whatever it might be. On this zone property, it's 3.5%. Most of them I see are either 3.5% or 5%. Why is that important? Because if you make a bid for $100,000, in this example, you actually therefore made a bid for $103,500. So the 618 offer that they didn't accept this morning was really 618 plus 3.5%. $20,000 more. So you have to know when you're making your bid, you gotta factor that in reality, you know, you're kind of backing your bid down so that you can then add that back in to what my price is. That auctioneer's premium, you can finance into your mortgage, just like you could finance into your mortgage a buyer agency fee. That's part of what we're going to, we ever get to the point where in Minnesota where we do real agency, so do a lot in California, right? So the seller paying the full commission, buyer actually pays, you can put that right into your mortgage, not a problem. So the other quirk with auctions is they're as is, like all my foreclosures, but auctions even more so. This one in zone will let you do an inspection, but they won't turn the water on for the inspection. In fact, originally they won't turn the power on either. Just packet of inspection, with no power and water. The inspectors are good, they can figure an awful lot out. With the water not on, it's winterized. But if they don't turn the water on, you could still hire somebody to do a pressure test on the plumbing. Actually, this one, we know there's plumbing damage, I put it right in a lot, that there's some freeze damage. But a pressure test can give you an awful lot of idea what the plumbing is gonna be like. So that means it's your inspection price, but the plumber and what your inspector to do, you know, a pressure test. But so what I always say is eyes wide open. I mean, you gotta know what you're doing when you're saying, you know, things, because some auction companies will say it's as is the moment you get your offer accepted, it's done. The next thing you deal with is how do I finance it? If I'm not turning utilities on, will my lender let me do a mortgage? The most will, if you do not, certainly not FHA, but you know, most will do a conventional loan. But we need to talk about it to your loan officer before you make that bid. Because you don't want to start losing your earnest money and discover, wait, you've got to have all the utilities on, I'm not doing it. So again, chatting with people, and most agents that have never done one call me for a pep talk and a lesson. And you know, and that's fine. And I go through these exact same things, no matter who you work for. Think about these things before you make a bid. It's not for everybody. Now, in return, this house, you know, in Troy Burton's example, in mid condition, it's worth probably $8 to $850. So if you bought it for $675, we know you're going to do some plumbing work, but aside from that, this one just needs paint carpet. Normally you go in there and say, what did they steal? You know, on the way out, that's kind of how foreclosures work a lot of times. This one is in really good shape. You can tell they care about it. So paint carpet, let's say you spent 10 grand on plumbing, but there's more than the 2 or 3 breaks I know about. Well, you know, you got maybe 7.25 now into it. You got a house that's worth over 800. That's instant equity. It sounds like a good deal. It's getting people to understand that and be comfortable with that. We got another auction property on right now in West Lakewood, sold last for $1.1 million. And that one they have is an occupied auction. So people are actually out of it, but nobody can step on the property, walk by the property, go in the property. You're buying it sight unseen. That's for people that got walls. I did, because I would buy that way. I didn't touch it. But you know, I sell 3 or 4 properties a year. That way that we never were inside. This one I've been inside, or actually Jeff's been inside. Let's face it. But nobody's gotten to see it for a showing. Now, I think it's a dumb style for the bank. That means you're going to get less for it. I mean, will you ever be able to sell it to even reasonably close to retail if you can't look at it, especially at $1.1 million? The bank's theory is they hold down liability because they know nothing. Right? Now this one, we're doing personal property eviction right now. I'm thinking they might be getting close to letting us actually sell it with being able to look at it. Which will help because so far, you know, they've been getting $300,000 to $400,000 bids. But I think if somebody said $700,000, they'd probably take it because they just want to be done. That's a Bank of America behind that one. Bank of America loves to just wholesale everything out. Doesn't like to touch anything, doesn't want to be involved in anything.
No, is the MLS the state you as the listing agent?
On that one, because it's a you just can't access it. I actually have to list it as temporarily not available for showings. So you can't even see it in the MLS. Because if you search the MLS, those don't come up. Yeah, I mean, I either had to withdraw it or temporarily not available for showings. They required to put it in the MLS. But then the MLS requires that if it's not available for showings, I have to make it inactive. So then I have to go back to the auction company and say, these are the rules. So you're not actually, no, some MLSs let you make, ours does not. And they say, fine, that's fine, just send us the sheet that shows what you did. And then I'm the listing agent. On the auction site, you'd see that, but you'd have to be searching their auction site to know that that's happening.
So, even if you Google it or search it on the MLS, says that right now,
You won't find
you can find it at all.
it, right? I think
So,
that's the whole point.
if I was able to track you down as a listing agent, could I call you up and say, hey, what's the property look like inside?
I'll answer the generic questions, not to a big degree, because I don't take any more liability than the bank taking. That one's in auction.com, so if you start wondering what kind of auction sites can I search, auction.com, tons of their stuff is not in the MLS. Lots of their stuff is still in redemption. So if you can't look at the house, you can't get inside it. You can't get a mortgage, right? You just can't get a price. So that means that a lot of the stuff in auction.com site are cash sales only. So those that get rich and the rich get richer kind of thing, those that can buy a property that way can really search for good deals. But now if you bought, I know where this one's at, but conceivably it can still be occupied. And you could buy that property as an occupied auction. And now you'd be in charge of any eviction, the occupant, any trash outs, any of those kind of things. They still could be involved in trash out. I don't know if they're gonna approve the trash out or not. So it's really a buyer beware there. The other thing, if you're going into auction.com, you're looking to make sure is the property before the sheriff's sale or after the sheriff's sale. Because if it's after the sheriff's sale, then all liens and encumbrances have been wiped out. If it's before the sheriff's sale and you bought it, you would also then buy all the liens and encumbrances on the property. So any second mortgages, any tax liens, any IRS tax liens, property tax liens, all those kind of things. Again, if you're that brave to do it, you certainly have a title company that walk alongside you to do quick title searches, so you do before you bid what your business. But you want to go eyes wide open. Kind of things. Other sites to look at, Altisource. .com, Altisource, ALTI source.com. And Aquin Mortgage, if you've heard of them. And Altisource has been buying up everything. I mean, they must have a lot of money. So they do, most of their properties do go into the MLS. And you'll see the word Altisource right in the remarks on when we're to make the bid. They use one real estate agent mainly for the entire country. So when you're talking to that agent for sure doesn't know anything. In fact, never been to the house. Use somebody else's pictures to put it in the MLS. I've listed probably 15, 20 in my life for them, but most of the time they like to use the national because they think that gives them less liability. Can't answer a question if I don't know anything.
Well, when you have that of your buyers buy a property, what do you do? So put it in for buyer?
Yes,
So
you
say,
always want to be, no matter what the site is, you always want to be the person entering.
well, when you're entering it, you say, I'm entering this for.
Yes, there's a spot that you look when you're going on anybody's site, you'll look to make sure you're registering yourself as the agent and then bidding versus going in as the bidder. So make sure you start, if you don't see that, go to the helpline that's there and just say, I'm not seeing where to make sure I'm registered as a bidder. But when your clients say, why are you important? Aside from just on the date, right? Why are you important? Is because on an auction, I actually need an agent more. Somebody to say, stop. Right? I mean, if you see it on the movies all the time, the person keeps bidding. Sometimes you're supposed to stop here, right? What did we say our comp set going in? What are we gonna do? Altisource, Lynn and I were bidding on one, it's a brick rambler that we wanted to fix up in White Bear. And every time there was a deadline, it was like midnight, but every time somebody made a bid, the deadline extended by 15 minutes to let everybody else have a chance because they just got out bid. And you've been out there. At 2 or 3 in the morning, and I wanted this property bad. My wife looked at me and said, we're going to bed. We're done. If you don't get that last bid, we're done. Well, the next bid. So in my mind, we lost a property that wanted over $1,000. No, her answer is right. We probably would have just stayed up all night because the other person might have stayed here forever. Come on. Make sure you wait so they all know another person came. But again, Altisource is the absolute, they will do nothing. You're buying it, as is, There's no inspection, no, either in or you're out when you make that bid. But again, it was a brick rambler and like there, it seemed like, everything could be blown up and I'd still be okay on it. My problem is, I used to flip a lot of properties. But then I started working with all the banks and their conflicts of interest with everybody. So I haven't bought anything in a couple of 10, 12 years where I used to do half a dozen a year, but as I grew, there was just nobody I had conflicts with, or I'd have to go and declare my interest the moment I saw it. And back out of the listing if they let me and agree to, a neutral party or whatever. It's like, do you really screw up an account that gives you, 10, 15, 20 in the prime of this foreclosure world? Listings a year just to buy one. So I just stopped buying properties. But you can search the word auction in the MLS. You can search the word foreclosure in the MLS. So sometimes we're working with people and we want to avoid all the stressed properties. But other clients, we should only look at distressed properties or break them into two sections. So do a distress search so that your head's on with what those are when you're presenting them to your client. You hate to send one over to them and that's like, oops, I should have thought that one out. I got a guy that only wants to spend 180 right now, good buy distress, but by the way, I'm not Andy, I can't do any work. Well, 180 in this market says you have to do work. Or how far into Wisconsin are we gonna go? Everybody wants it as a rental. They keep saying, well, who's your renter? As we get in, I mean, I'll go anywhere, it's fine. But, you gotta figure out, is this intelligent or should you sit on the sideline? It's all wrong. Yeah, or his part of the world would come down for it easier to afford. But maybe if you bought one for 150 and there's just a little rehab one. So we can make it, right? HUD Home Store, which is FHA foreclosures. Again, all the FHA properties do go into the MLS. They don't sell anything that doesn't get listed in the MLS, but you're gonna start seeing more and more of those as the world changes. In the last couple of years, rates are down low and housing prices were going up fast enough that people in trouble to get out. We're gonna see a whole lot more people not be able to get out because we're making this move in the market. So you're gonna see that pick up. HUD Home Store is an interesting thing when you're watching a HUD foreclosure. HUD almost never does a price reduction. But if you look at the final sale price on them, they come down lots of times. So what I do with my investors when I'm working with somebody, again, there was a time when they were very troubled, but you're gonna see them really come back over the next couple of years, I think. And remember, everything's 6 months behind in Minnesota. So bad world means, it's the end of the year before we see that inventory. But if you bid on a HUD property, they will counter you with what they'll take. Well, now we know what they'll take. And so now you look at your numbers and say, well, does that number make sense for me? If not, the next week I'd have my investors bid again. Because at some point in time, everybody's ready to do price reduction. They'll do it indirectly inside there, but you'll finally start figuring out, so sometimes the best HUD property is been on the market for 30 or 60 days, they failed for a while. But if you make that initial bid, even if it's a junky bid, you'll start getting a flavor for what they're gonna accept.
Now, with doing the bid, you have to have anything, right? Is that,
That's what's fun about HUD property. You just use their site and then they generate the forms. Same thing with the zones, once they generate the forms. So I mean, when we get paper about what we're getting paid, the HUD pays well. I think they pay 3%. But when we get hyper about what we're getting paid, it's not hard work. You're at a computer screen. Which bid is, some of them require you to upload the offer, and you'll see that when you go into the actual. The zones, the OM does not require it. Because you use their forms. You'll have to add a few forms because their forms won't necessarily have the state mandated forms. A lot of times they won't sign the state mandated forms, and national companies believe they're above those state mandated forms. But I mentioned the word auction a few times lately in these meetings. You're going to see it a lot more because there are a lot of people that cried foul, in 08, 09, I didn't get my offers presented. So a lot of places, like especially the big banks, like to use auction methods because nobody can cry foul, nobody can come back later, say that and get a chance. So you just want to embrace that. I don't think we're gonna see a ton of short sales coming out. But we might start seeing those. If you get a short sale listing lead, talk to me first. We would just assume that you hire an attorney to do the negotiation on the short sales, unless you know what you're doing. So some of us have done them in a while and say none of us know what we're doing. So let's have an attorney do that. The fees are not out of your pocket anyhow, the fees are paid inside the sale. So once short sales start picking up a little more, we'll get that law firm that we always use in to do a meeting and explain that there's no reason to get real good at it right now. Just know that if they're upside down and we think we're gonna get less at closing than they owe. I mean, I got a closing that we're hoping to close tomorrow. It's an investor that bought a ton of properties and has a banking services for them. So when I look online, the mortgage is over $5 million. Selling for 149, I think. So obviously there's a few other properties in there. So first I gotta get a release. Then I have to get a payoff for the portion of this, and it's actually a negative. So I don't think it's the best portfolio of properties they ever own. So I gotta get a payoff and I gotta get a wire to be able to close tomorrow. But my sellers, I mean, $75,000 whole on that one. Now they have plenty of money. We don't feel bad for them. But this same investor group in Georgia just assigned 7 more properties to me. So they're going to start, getting out of the rental property business. We did exciting a bunch of the big investors that came in and bought tons of inventory, invitation homes, about 1,500 houses in the Twin Cities. I sold 150 to them. They're going to start slowly starting to sell some of their assets off. When we talk about not having enough inventory for regular single family, not new construction, it's simply because about 20% of our inventory is held by corporate entities. We have plenty of houses that are included in development if they weren't owned by one company owning 1,000 of them. So I'm hoping I get more calls, like that, where they start, but this investor group, these 7 that came into me now, all of them have been vacant for more than a year. And they have been renting them. So they must have thought they were going to do something. It's like, how much money do you have that you just leave them sit there? I've got another investor group that uses one of my lender clients to service their properties. They pulled properties from me in 2017, 18, and early 19 to put into their rental pool. And my team wanted to throw files out. I said, no, we don't throw any files out. Everything comes back. They're all coming back. Now, they've been vacant the whole time. I mean, I just went to one, we lost it in 2018. I had given them the list of work to do. They did the work. And then I went there this weekend and I was saying to Jeff how the carpet still has vacuum lines in it. And he pulled up the picture he took in 2018 when he was there. He said, Mike, those carpet lines were there in 2018. It sat there for 3 years. They've been shoveling and cutting the lawn and maintaining it. But I'm not even sure they're going to inspect it because the carpet has the line perfectly. It's like, how many of you would know that doesn't even have a footprint? But there's no dust in it. It's like, my report was, let's list it today. I'd like this one. But there's a lot of investor groups that were just buying everything up and didn't know what to do with it. So they're going to come out and act like REO properties. Everybody knows what the word REO means. Real estate holding in the bank's department. So we call them foreclosures, but banks call them REOs. That's the fancy word for it. So we're going to start seeing, hopefully some of that kind of stuff. We're going to see a lot more bank foreclosures coming out. Remember, we've done a couple of years of moratoriums. So a lot of these properties have sat for a while, sat conceivably with the person still in it because nobody could do an eviction. They couldn't even trash out a vacant house during the moratorium. So we're going to start seeing more of that stuff coming up. So that's why you want to learn to be ready to start doing searches. You're looking for deals, especially if you got an investor. I don't set investors up on searches that go to them. I do searches every couple of days looking to see who should I call, what should I call about. We have a ton of real estate agents that buy from Jeff and I. where we'll call them and, they know that I'm gonna see a deal before they ever saw the deal. So we take the commission, if they flip it on their own, I make it 12. But they just know that, what day is the best day to buy in foreclosure, well, it's the day the price is right. Not necessarily the day it's listed. So making a ton of phone calls today, there's a price reduction. Those kind of things, they're hustle like that. So watch the world, the REO world. If you go into St. Paul, that's where historically, there's a lot of foreclosures. I don't think we're gonna see it as strong as St. Paul. I think this next wave is gonna be more of a suburban wave. It's gonna be a white collar world instead of a blue collar, because blue collar went under in 08, 09 because of the types of loans you could do. Arms that you can option arms, that you can pick which one of the 4 payments you want to make each month, and you wonder why that didn't go well. As people got upside down and stuff. But I think this is gonna be more of a suburban world, but if you go into a foreclosure, you're gonna see things like Cat 2 in St. Paul, vacant housing list, properties, code compliance, requirements. Again, if you're working with a first-time home buyer, those are hard situations. You have to do a rehab loan. You got great rehab loan officers if you have a reason to do one. If your loan officer says, "Oh yeah, I know how to do them," but they stuttered for a second, that's not the loan officer for a rehab loan. I specialize in them would be the loan officer you're looking for, because they're hard and they don't close probably 75% of the time, because the loan officer is over their head, the buyer's over their head, both of them are over their head, how's it gonna close? So if you're in the city of St. Paul and you see, that it's a Cat 2 or on the vacant housing list, your next question is there a code compliance report available? If it's done, now it takes 4 or 5 weeks, so most of the time when they go on the market, it's not done when it lists. But once it's done, the agents will always load it up into the MLS supplements. Those code compliance repairs have to be done by the buyer before the buyer can move into the property. So again, not a regular FHA loan, because they require you to move into the property. So you're looking either for cash, that's the easiest, or a rehab loan, or someone that allows a big enough down payment to be interested in doing it. But they have to have the money both for the purchase and the rehab. The city of St. Paul has to approve the buyer. They have to approve bids, because the city wants to know that you can actually do it. You got 90 days to get it done. And you cannot occupy the property until the work is done and the city signed off on it. If you're somebody that likes to do work yourself, you still have to bid out with a contractor the whole job. And anything that needed a permit still needs to be done by a licensed contractor. So basically, you can paint yourself. But everything else, pretty much on code compliance. You wouldn't use the word code and work that we can do ourselves. But they can be great opportunities. We're just finishing up the sale on Como today. Again, the same investor group that pulled everything, fixed it up, and then let it sit. We let it sit in the city of St. Paul, and you end up on the vacant housing list. That means now they have fixed a house up, but didn't do code repairs because they didn't know what they were or cared. So we have freshly painted, new carpet, and all those kind of things. And now I have code compliance report, and somebody has to do that. The bank investor doesn't understand why we're getting less money. I just fixed it all up. Well, you did the wrong repairs. Because now that you sat here, the city expects you to do all this plumbing and electrical. In fact, probably open up some of the walls. But again, they can be great opportunities. The investors that are good at St. Paul love code compliance because they know everybody else runs from it. So then they can make good money off it. If you're going to keep it as a rental, doing code compliance repairs is a great thing, because you can get through that rental inspection pretty easy. You just did everything in the city. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people don't want to do rentals in St. Paul.
The clients, on the MLS or where they?
Yes. Yeah, you could search even, if you learn to do keyword searches, you could search code compliance. You can find all the properties that anybody has listed right now. When I'm busier, lots of people search my MLS number every day, looking to see what do I have for sale. I can't keep up with that people, what they said they were looking for or whatever. That's a little easier right now. But at my peak, I had 125 listings on the month. So I didn't tell you, you could search and figure out what you got, but you learn to do, keyword searches for anything. those aren't in, in a pool, you can search because the pool's blank. But, in foreclosures are blank, but other keyword searches that get you, the fixer operates is the blank, sweat equity, any of those words that you think might get you the type of properties you're looking for, if that's your goal. And I think everybody always should have a couple of investors you work with. A couple of them that you do help find, and you find somebody who'll buy 3, 4, 5 houses a year. That's the next days to your life. There.
Like, here's a weird question, like, how do you weed out, like, you get these in that, oh, I'm an investor, the really, obviously, I've got feelings, and we ask questions, but.
Yeah, that was the interesting.
Here, they're straight up, whatever and then there's the guys who just kind of get that, I'm back and away from this. Shady.
You can tell which ones just took a class. They start telling you what I can afford to pay for this house and they haven't seen it. And so I'm those kind of people, when they call me, hey, I see your new listing on Central, would they take an offer for 110? Well, how do you know it's worth 110? You've been there. I won't show off or sell a house sight unseen. So either you or somebody, in your pool of people need to come look at it and decide whether or not that offer makes any sense. But you can tell from those kind of calls who you want to try to convert into a client. Because you also start finding out they don't actually have the money to just bird dogging for somebody else.
Right, like,
Yeah.
that's like, I just had it, I'm like, either you kind of come up that you can prove that you have some cash money.
Right.
From your bank or something, X amount, or.
Yeah, if I'm gonna really work with somebody, I'm like, you're gonna come sit down with me and we're gonna talk, you're gonna show me proof of funds that we can do this and we'll go to work for it.
Right, and I kind of held my ground,
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm not,
Yeah, we are, again, when it's your listing, you have to be careful because you're marketing it for yourself. When somebody else is listing, well, you're marketing for yourself. Do I want to convert you? You shouldn't convert them all because most of them are never gonna buy a property. So yes, you want to make sure, do you have the wherewithal to do what you're saying? I mean, a lot of these properties is cash, real cash, and rehab cash. So do you have a line of credit set up? If you want to just give me copies of that, so I can, you're an LLC, correct? Give me copies of that. Start making sure that they're giving you things that make them look real. Then they go to work. Or again, we've had clients that we have sold, 10, 15 properties in a year. That we knew what they were looking for and we knew what we had. But if they sound kind of interesting, you'll show one. So that we figure out if there's a love connection or not. But again, you can tell there used to be a new, because the classes all came to town, now everything's online. But you'd see all those ads, come for this, evening session, and you have this suites, and you'll learn how to buy with 0 down and all that. Well, then the phones ring up off the hook for a week or two. After that, those ones I don't jump at. But if you have a great conversation with them, have you ever bought one before? No. Well, the code compliance property is probably not your first one. My investor that, talked about, he bought a house from me, well, I know him. He is pre-approved. He doesn't have enough money to do much out there. He lives in River Falls. So, we kind of said, well, what if we went the other way from River Falls a little bit? But if you go too rural, is there any rental income left? He's paying 150. Well, you better be able to get 1,500 in rent. That's right, for a basic BAS formula. Well, if I'm 30 minutes from New Richmond and no work, anywhere near me, do I get $1,500 for a 3-bedroom, 2-story in the middle of nowhere? No, I don't think so. I mean, it's out of my main deal, but I mean, you can do quick searches and stuff. Now we looked at one that was in the middle of nowhere, except at the end of the road was a high school and a clinic. Well, now I could make some arguments there until we walked in the house. The house is disgusting. And there's some where you walk in these rural houses and say, I can fix them up. And others you walk in and say, this wasn't built good to start with. So the fact that you can cancel your health club membership because you can walk through the house with that uphill slope, that you don't need a treadmill, just go into the kitchen to work out. What do? I mean, just store those up and You know, when it says there's a basement, but you can find it, you know, it's not really gonna get sorted out, it is what it is. And that's, you know, as you go out further, that's kind of what we've been seeing with that one. I offered it to Brad, but he didn't have to. Oh, Mike, you like him, it's something you got a good rapport, you go. But, so that's, you know, the biggest thing I wanted to do is just really just kind of wet your whistles. You'll see little, you know, increases here in, you know, coming, you know, days, weeks, months. But when you look at how much was held back with the moratoriums and stuff, I think we're going to, and now rates where they are, it's easy to get out when they were 3%. I mean, you're getting 5 offers on the house, so all those people that were in trouble, you know, could save themselves. Most of the foreclosures I get never were on the market, never tried to sell. If you imagine what your mind's like when you're losing your house, even though the market was good, they never tried to sell. We've got one, we're doing a lot of the cash for keys offers have gotten better. We give cash to get you to move out, rather than do an eviction. Yeah, I got one in Robbinsdale that we're doing on Friday. And normally my properties I can drive by because you don't need the address. You can just see the house and pull in because there hasn't been any maintenance in a bunch of years. If you're in trouble with the payments, you certainly didn't keep up on the house. It's pretty easy to say. Well, this one I drove right by. Williams Christine is the prettiest house on the block. But he never thought he was gonna lose it. But he also never tried to sell it. It's like, you know, I don't know what he's got into it. I don't always know all the back numbers because I'll pay things to sell houses. But it's like, how could you have not in a good market have gotten out, you know, of this house, at least from the outside, see what I see it inside. But that one's getting $2,500 to move. We did, last month, we did a couple where we gave 2 different houses $1,000 to leave everything, but sign a personal property release. You know, where you could tell there's no way they're gonna get it cleaned out and broom swept condition to do a normal cash for keys. But if we have to do a personal property eviction, we have to go to court, spend legal fees. Then we have to store everything in the house for 28 days before we can trash it out. And so you start adding all those costs up and it's like, here's $1,000. We'll give you 3 weeks, you know, to move out, take whatever you want. And then sign this personal property release so everything's flat for a while. Which is a nice aggressive way to give them some moving money. And it gets us, you know, into the house. But we've done cash for keys, you know, over $10,000 on some houses. To just save the trouble of doing an eviction. Well, we got your questions. I just wanted to ramble on with what was happening in the world a little bit. I mean, the biggest thing is start learning to search for them, learn how to make the MLS your partner in this. And then just find those people that you should be able to say, hey, this thing just came up. I mean, when you're looking to have a reason to call somebody, you know, like an investor, you don't call to say hi. But if you call and say, hey, this one just came up, but we'll use the same good deal with all 5 or 6 or 10 people. You know, because we don't need, even if it's not what they said they were looking for, it's an easier phone call. To a good investor is to say, there's an opportunity. And they say, oh, I'm not looking to be over there. That's cool. This was interesting. Just wanted to call out.
What are some good resources to maybe refer to somebody that's newer that maybe wants to flip or whatever and say, hey, maybe you need to do, you know, your own research to really start educating yourself to.
It's learning how to be able to bid out houses. So if they don't know what they're doing, they need to have a contractor that will work closely with them. And if they like something, the contractor should go through with them. So they talk about, and I can bid a house and be almost to the penny and what it's gonna cost to fix it up. But if you've never done one, you wouldn't help. So finding who's gonna be your help. For a lot of investors, doing the first one as a team with somebody else. And learning that you don't have to hit a home run to do a good deal. You know, it's fun when you have one and you make $50,000 or more on a deal. That's kind of cool. That's not how it works. You get singles, you made $10,000 or $15,000. So then you gotta make sure your numbers are right. Because 10 or 15,000 is your profit. You gotta make sure when you say what's gonna be worth afterwards. You know, you gotta be able to do a net sheet of that, you know, and that's when you do the fast numbers and say, hey, we're expecting we might have to pay closing costs and stuff now. So I always just choose 10%. So if I can sell a house for 300 fixed up, I got 30 grand worth of selling expenses. I got another $5,000 or $10,000 of holding costs depending on how long I hold this thing. So now I'm at, 260. If I paid 200 for it, and I put 30 into it, I still made $30,000. But if you're that close at your numbers and you're off by, 10 and all of a sudden, I've done a couple where we've written out checks in closing, they don't call that investment. I call that bad decisions. Now, normally it was with partners that I didn't overrule, and I learned that maybe I should speak up. I've been one that's usually used other people's money, it's way more fun. To invest in properties where, they've got the cash, I got the knowledge. It's a great partnership made in heaven. I used to let them though have one more vote than me, it's like, it's all your money, I'm taking half the profits, but it's all your money. And they didn't make good decisions. They had one partner that decided we should have an extra bathroom. Extra bathrooms are always worthwhile, we would put it in the basement. And he was just gonna run it over the top of the concrete, that's not cool. But it was at the corner, Van Buren and Dale. And so he had contractors there, and didn't pull permits. I always pull permits. They just got started without me. But plumbers, but we're just gonna do a rinky-dink thing. Until the city stopped and said, no, one, you need a permit. Two, you're gonna put it in code. Well, code's a jackhammer, right? You gotta bury the lines. Well, this $2,000 bathroom, which I can see the point, right? Well, it's an $8,000 bathroom. Now, because we're gonna do it real, it's free. There's nothing else in this basement that was finished. What the bathroom down there for? What do we do? It's like, but again, he just did it, when they show up, and it's like, oh, this was not in our discussion. It had value. It didn't. So at that closing, we throw out a couple $1,000 at closing. Yeah, but the deal we had done before, we made 50 grand, so we each got 25 grand. So he said, income average. We've each now made $21,000. We each paid a couple out of our pocket, but look how our partnership is awesome. So every property has to work on its own. I have another partner that did granite countertops. We bought an estate property in back row. But we saved the cabinets, the original cabinets. And they said, let's rip those cabinets on. They're so awesome, the character of the house. Well, if you've ever seen an old cabinet, they don't hold plates. They're too narrow. So we have these gorgeous granite countertops on cabinets that don't hold any normal dishes. So after 60 days on the market, we ripped that kitchen out, put the kitchen in. But the countertops are too narrow now for the new cabinets. So, but they had hot water heat. I said, hey, when they come out, just have our guy clean up all the granite, put them on the top of the radiators. Be a really slick looking radiator company. He didn't understand what I meant, so he threw the granite out. $3,000 of the granite just gone. Now and again, you're going out and check it at closing. In Mac Rose, shouldn't happen. But so you really do, they gotta have somebody telling them numbers and real and really working that paper. And anticipating what's wrong. If you watch it in the rehab shows, they always talk about contingency fund. What did they put extra into the budget to be ready for mistakes? Because if you're gonna just hit, again, if you imagine, you did 6 properties a year and made 15 grand on each, that's $90,000. That's a home run at the end. But it's a bunch of singles. You just have to make sure your numbers are right. Even a good inspector. Yeah, and a lot of times you can't get by on non-contingent, you can't be subject to an inspection. Well, there's lots of inspectors that will walk through, for 150 bucks, not do a full inspection, just talk out loud. Which is really all you need to go push numbers. Together. Some will let you do inspections, so I can check your rules and know ahead of time. But you will usually, in multiple offers, always lose to somebody that bought with no inspection because they've done enough of that, they know what they're looking at. It's kind of like my one with frozen pipes in Wisconsin. I mean, $800,000 house all done. A lot of the buyers, because they're owner occupied buyers, that are looking at this, are thinking frozen water pipes, this could be $50,000 or $100,000. Or it could be $5,000 to $10,000, which is what it really is. But they make it a big deal. We're an investor, but this isn't an investment kind of property. See, it's hard to get the buyers to understand, take a deep breath. You know, even if I'm a little low, I'm not massively low, and you still make $100,000. The day you move in. Seems like a good bet, but, you know, it's a harder thing for buyers.
No, these auction sites that say cash and hard money be counted as cash or that's.
Some yes and some no. Everybody know what hard money is? So hard money is a private lender. So, people love to say, I'm getting a hard money. It's a loan. So it's interesting. So we want me to know you're getting the hard money, which therefore is a loan from somebody, another person, but I want to call it cash. Well, cash is subject to nothing. The cash is in a bank or in a, you know, line of credit or, you know, and even somebody says I'm going to get a line of credit isn't cash because you don't have a line of credit. Yeah, what if the bank says you don't have enough equity? So, you know, cash is cash. So when I put a hard money loan deal into, you know, getting my sellers, and normally it's an offer site that I use. I call it a loan. Yeah, because you can't call it anything else. I mean, it's still subject to title work. Most of them are still gonna do an appraisal. I don't know how we call these things cash. But everybody with hard money wants to say it is. The good investors all have, that's where they're getting most of their money. Because you know, how many people really have, you know, $1 million in bank or whatever. So they're using hard money loans. If there are no other offers there, you're fine most of the time, but if there's another offer that's cash, that will lose. Because it's not as simple as it sounds. In fact, normally it's harder than a regular one because they're working with people that they didn't think were that impressive either, right? So you know, they're looking to make sure their P's and Q's are right, because if it doesn't work out, they end up in the house. And that's clearly not the business they're in. We used to have a lot of lenders in town that people got their money from. That acted like hard money, but they were local, and you do the loan officers and stuff, and that's all that they could do. There's a couple of Sunrise Bank and University did that, so that was a little easier. But most of these hard money lenders are, you know, someplace you've never heard of, and their letters have so many outs in it that, you know, I mean, it's worse than a pre-qual letter. And pre-qual letters mean nothing. So, you know, it's interesting. So when you get that investor that calls from having gone to the class, and I got a hard money lender, so I'm cash. Well, you don't know what you're doing until you're not cash. But it's better than nothing. And there, I mean, close tons of hard money loan deals. It's just if you've never done one, they're gonna be looking at it even harder. And what's amazing to me is that they, just like a pre-qual, they seem to look after the deals together than before. You know, it's like, how can we be having this conversation when you get that phone call on a regular deal, hey, they don't qualify? You know, well, I got a letter here that says you said they're all good to go. Well, once we actually check their information, only what was the point of it?
I had one that I was working with an investor that, our money lender gave me a pre-approval letter, did it not, we got it accepted. And then one day came around and watched both comps on it, you can't offer that much on it. This is gonna be the max, you gotta redo the offer.
Yeah, and that makes you wonder who should apply.
Yeah, I was like, I already had it accepted,
Right.
accepted offer for the dollar amount that we agreed on, and you said, go, now you gotta tell me that I gotta go. Call the listing agent up, and tell them that, oh, sorry, you know, that we gotta come down 20,000 on our offer.
Right. And yet we actually haven't done an inspection or anything else, right? I mean, this is just some guy at a computer, yes, you know, said, no, this is the one. But yeah, that's what it's all about it, is that, you know, they're looking to guarantee they're not gonna get their property back.
You know, they got the hard money guy that he was working with. It wasn't an appraisal, but he actually had to walk through. Property itself, just to make sure that. The repair scheme thought, first line with, the repairs that they got started thought.
And if they'll do that timing, we can call it the inspection. That's the hard part to get them to understand. Timing, so yes,
He'd get into that next,
okay, good.
but he wouldn't go up with Wisconsin, with all metro.
Right, which makes sense. Am I getting kicked out? Am I not?
Oh, I was gonna take a photo,
Oh, yeah.
so please resume.
Yeah. But yeah, so you got, hard money is absolutely better than zero, but you do have to be careful with it. And clearly, As I always say, since you took the time to come in here and listen, if you have questions or you're playing around on the computer and want to talk about something, ask. If you watch the video, you can ask me a question. If you didn't do any of that, leave me alone. But I just want people to be ready, because it's going to become much more normal. Not to the, it's not gonna be an 08, 09 thing. That doesn't mean we might not get as many failures. I think we will, but there's gonna be a lot of stuff going on. The world's changing, rapidly. The biggest difference from then to now is that it's hedge funds and private investors that buy a whole tape and they, like Bank of America sells 100 at a time because they don't like you. Wells Fargo, I'm still one of their approved, realtors to sell their properties. I've had listed for years. What are they doing with that? They're obviously vacant, but most of them just don't want to ever have them. US Bank puts it into these syndicates, which they end up getting them back and, through, these investor groups and stuff, but they don't want their name out there. So it's just, most of them don't want to be in the newspaper. They're done with that, so they'd rather somebody else take it. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac sell tons of their stuff and take strips, rather than, take them in, but somebody's still ends up owning them, somebody's still gonna sell them.
Right.
It just doesn't look like we imagine. So that's, you start working with hedge funds or whatever, it's fine, and just work a little different scenarios.
You're got me brainstorming a little bit, like. I'm fascinated when I'm listening to Andy talk to his age group. How many?
And I can't wait for Andy to say he was fascinated listening to you. But I agree with you.
That's pretty good.
There's something.
Now, how many are interested in investing, right, in real estate investing? Well, like when I was his age. Wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff, but just getting a home, really. So as when you look at this and you look at that, young professionals with some money, but is this an avenue that they could take that?
Well, and if you look at the reality of life, the way to get wealth in this world is real estate.
Right.
And to get generational wealth is to ask real estate on. So yeah, absolutely. And the neat thing is if they're ready on house, then we can be talking about line credits and things like that, which makes that cash ability, or at least a big enough down payment. There are lots of great investor loans out there. You just want to go and do your homework to get ready for them. And again, there's great rehab loans, and we got a couple of good. So you've heard, those are the kind of investors that are fun to pick up, and they'll do one a year because they're just learning, how to do it. And then all of a sudden, a couple of friends will get together and do one, and maybe keep one and flip one, depending on, and one partner that if we got into the project and he decided to keep it, he would buy me out of the project. Because lots of times you fall in love with it while we're working on it. It's like, maybe I'll keep this as a rental. It's like, that's cool, still get a couple dollars, I still was here, but I don't want to be your partner, in your rental.
Right.
Business. I don't like renters. So I've never kept anything. I've always just flipped properties when we did them. I like vacation rentals because then somebody else manages it, deals with it. I don't know how to fix toilet, I'm not gonna learn, and so don't call me. But there's also great property managers.
And my brother and I used to counsel.
Yeah,
That was great. We didn't have to.
yeah, because I'm not going out.
Right.
It's not gonna happen. And remember, if you do anything, you follow the book. We got a real estate license and people are looking to put a bullseye on us. So, if you buy something yourself, really just do it by the book. I used to try to explain to my partners, I'm a real estate agent. Permits, everything by the book, or no shortcuts, here. But yeah, encouraging your friends. We haven't done one in a while, but we've done investor, seminars, where we've talked about how to get financing. We had a great bank that did investor financing, wanted to do investor financing. A lot of them do it by default, but others actually think it's the right tool for their portfolio. We had a retirement guy come in and talk about how you can use your retirement account, pay cash for properties into checkbook IRA. And you can buy the property, keep them in the IRA, flip them in the IRA and make money in your IRA. So we got a great guy for that. He spent most of his time in Phoenix Lake all now, but he'd come in if we wanted him. We had Scott Miller come in and talk about management and buying, commercial real estate. A lot of commercial real estate's an interesting thing, especially buying a fully, if you've got friends that are getting into that mindset. Scott's talking about property, and I just listed with a couple of just out of college kids that are looking for a fully rented office building to buy as it is. Oh, no, I guess as they come from families that have something behind them. My family didn't use talks like that during college. But, obviously it's fully rented and then I'm just gonna manage it and keep going with what was working already there. So, it's a great conversation to have, but it's also a great reason to, you can put an investor seminar together and you got 4 or 5 of us do it. The room looks full, but we did one, right? We had 20, 25 people get here, one time. So it's a topic that people love to talk about.
We looked at something else out there. Exchange.
Oh, right. Yeah, Jeff Peterson, 1031 exchange guy, downtown Minneapolis. So the owner property, this, in fact, the office building that Scott and I just listed, he wants to do a 1031 exchange. He's owned it since it was built, so his capital gains are probably 300,000 or 400,000. But he wants to do a 1031 exchange into like kind of real estate, but where he has no involvement. Yeah, so even, you hear about all these triple net leases and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't even want that. He doesn't want to even remotely be involved in management. He doesn't want to pay the capital gains tax. So he's looking at doing Delaware statutory trust, which is a totally passive, but a legal way to do a 1031 exchange. It will only get him a 4 or 5% return. But he's getting that return also on money he would pay tax on it. That's 300,000 or 400,000. So in the end, his net return on the money he was going to keep, probably blends out to 6 or 7%. But he did nothing. It'll be a passive income, hard to sell, just be an income stream. But as he starts winding things down, just wants income streams, it's a brilliant idea. Our 1031 exchange guy was throwing out all kinds of ideas. And we finally said, I should probably stop talking. It appears that you really want passive. So all these other ideas don't make any sense. Let's just talk about the one that would do the tax protection that you want. And we'll get sometime this year, we'll get our 1031 exchange guy in here to do a class. That's a really interesting thing. If all you want to do when you're talking with an investor that has a property is to wet their whistle enough to turn that conversation over to somebody else, right? We are not experts at 1031 exchanges, but we are experts enough to start a conversation. I had people in Egan that I went and met with. They mentioned they own a couple other properties. They were thinking they didn't want to be investors anymore. I said, if you ever thought about doing a 1031 exchange into something probably commercial where there's less involvement, could you hire all that out? They called me back the next day and said, no, but we will sell all 3 properties. So a great conversation. I sold 3 properties. They do any 1031 exchanges. They prefer paying the tax and just being done with it. But I went, getting one appointment, didn't even know about the other properties, wet their whistle to me trying to get them the document listed. The other 2, so it's like works out. Had they wanted to talk 1031, it would have looked how it's spelled with Jeff Scott. I did that last week with the one that we're talking with. And so, we've got great resources that you all you're going to do is what people is. If you own one, you might keep moving on. Any other questions? If you really have any questions, ever just back available for you 24/7. Answer it. Yeah.
What I'm here for.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully this helped. If you've got more stuff in the future, reach out.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we're at,
No, I'm just not.
No, I was not in class this morning.
Okay, we're done. No secrets for tomorrow.
They're not. The place sucks.
Yeah, he's got a. Yeah,
the